No one will ever tell you this directly, because when you understand, the game changes, and many people lose control over you. For years, you were taught to be the right guy, kind, available, predictable. The one who responds quickly, who validates, who tries to please. And maybe you even got attention with that, but never real power, because there's an uncomfortable truth that almost no one dares to admit. Attraction doesn't come from kindness. It comes from tension. And it's precisely here that an ancient, almost forbidden logic comes into play. A vision that Niccolò Machiavelli already applied to power. It's not about being liked. It's about being impossible to ignore. Now think about it. Why do some men enter a woman's life and are forgotten in days, while others stay in her mind for weeks, months, sometimes years? It's not looks, it's not money, it's not luck, it's perception, it's psychological, it's a policy guided by reality, not ideals. These men understood something you may never have realized. Desire isn't built with constant presence. It's built with control. Control of time, attention, emotion. They don't chase. They don't beg for validation. They create a dynamic where her mind starts working for them, where every absence weighs, where every word has an impact, where every silence creates more connection than 1,000 messages. And here's the point that will bother you, because this isn't about superficial techniques. It's not about catchphrases, pickup lines, or childish games. This is about understanding real human nature, including your own. It's about perceiving how the brain reacts to scarcity, uncertainty, and intermittency. It's about applying virtù and fortuna in the emotional field, knowing how to act and knowing when to retreat, knowing when to show and knowing when to hide. And above all, knowing that the end justifies the means, not in the sense of manipulation, but of understanding that whoever masters the psychological masters the game. The question is, are you prepared to see this unfiltered? Because once you understand, there's no going back to being the same. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos. It's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He didn't learn this from romance novels. He learned it by observing the world as it really is. While many still believe that winning someone over is about being kind, predictable, or always available, he understood something deeper, something that Niccolò Machiavelli had already made clear centuries ago. Power is not given away. Power is built. And in seduction, it's no different. There's a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, where the game isn't about pleasing, but about influencing. He knows that deep down, what captivates isn't kindness, it's the psychological impact. That's why he doesn't enter an interaction trying to be loved. He understands that often it's better to be feared than loved, not in the literal sense, but in the sense of being unpredictable, difficult to read, impossible to control. And that changes everything. Because while an ordinary man tries to prove his worth all the time, he creates value simply by not giving himself away easily. He plays a silent game where every action has intention, where every word has weight. It's not about manipulating, it's about understanding real human nature and acting accordingly. And notice, when he enters a room, He doesn't try to be the most likable or the funniest. He observes, he analyzes. He understands who seeks attention and who controls it. And then, without rushing, he begins to act with a calculated use of force, which here isn't physical force, but presence, silence, timing. A simple example. While everyone responds to messages in seconds, he responds at his own pace. Not out of empty games, but because he understands that excessive availability diminishes value. While others praise indiscriminately, he chooses when and how to validate. This creates an invisible tension, a curiosity, and that's where the real strategy comes in. He builds an image, an appearance of virtue mixed with mystery. He doesn't reveal everything, he doesn't over-explain, he leaves gaps. Because he knows that the human mind hates emptiness and tries to fill it. And when it tries to fill it, it begins to invest emotionally. That's the point where seduction ceases to be external and begins to happen within her mind. Now, here comes the part that few dare to admit. This game demands extreme emotional control, because it's not about following ready-made rules, but about constantly adapting. Virtù and fortuna, strategic action combined with the right timing. He understands that each person reacts in a different way, that each context requires a different interpretation, constant adaptability. He doesn't force situations, he creates opportunities. He doesn't chase after people, he makes them come to him. And little by little, he builds something that goes beyond superficial attraction. He creates a presence that leaves a mark. But the more he understands this game, the more he realizes that he's not just dealing with external actions, but with something deeper, something that happens inside her mind, far from her eyes, where reality begins to mix with perception, and where the real game begins to be decided. He understood something that completely changes the game. A woman rarely falls in love with what is in front of her. She falls in love with what she believes is in front of her. It seems subtle, but that's all there is to it. While most try to prove who they are, he learns to influence how he is perceived. And this is not cheap illusion. It's strategy, a policy guided by reality, not by ideals. He knows that the human brain works through projections. When there is space, the mind fills it. When there is doubt, it creates a narrative. And it is in this space that he acts. He doesn't reveal everything about himself. He doesn't tell his whole story right away. He doesn't over-explain. He understands that excessive clarity kills the mystery. And without mystery, there is no imagination. And without imagination, there is no deep involvement. That's why he communicates precisely. He speaks enough and then withdraws. He creates presence and then absence. He doesn't try to convince anyone that he is interesting. He allows her mind to construct that idea. And when that happens, she is no longer reacting to him. She is reacting to her own imagination. And here's the detail that separates the ordinary from the strategic. It subtly fuels this construction. It's not about lying or inventing a character. It's about highlighting parts, hiding others, and letting the rest be filled in by perception. An appearance of virtue. He shows discipline, but doesn't immediately talk about his weaknesses. He demonstrates value, but doesn't boast. He shares small stories, but always leaves something open. For example, instead of saying, "I am very focused," he casually mentions that he wakes up early to solve important things. Instead of saying, "I have an interesting life," he briefly comments on a project, a trip, a goal, and changes the subject. This creates gaps, and these gaps are filled with idealization. And here comes a principle that Niccolò Machiavelli already applied to political power. What people believe is more important than what is entirely real. The end justifies the means, not in the sense of deceiving, but of understanding that perception is power. And whoever controls perception controls attraction. Now think about it. Why are some people forgotten in days while others stay in your mind for weeks, months, sometimes years? It's not intensity, it's incompleteness. He knows this. He creates experiences that don't fully close, a conversation interrupted at the right moment, a look that says a lot, but not everything, a farewell that leaves the feeling that something was missing. This activates a continuous mental process, and the more she thinks, the more she invests. This is virtù and fortuna in action, knowing when to act and when to stop. And it is here that seduction ceases to be about constant presence and begins to become about strategic absence. Because when he's not there, her mind works. And when the mind works, the bond strengthens. But this is still only the beginning, because controlling the imagination is powerful. But there is something even more intense, something that directly affects the emotional system. A dance between proximity and distance, between warmth and coldness, that few master, but that creates an effect impossible to ignore. Now he enters even more powerful territory, because here it's not just about perception, but about raw emotion. He understood that the human brain doesn't respond to constancy, it responds to variation. That's why predictable relationships lose strength over time, while unstable relationships create intense attachment. It seems counterintuitive, but it's pure human nature. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. While many believe they should always be affectionate, always present, always available, he realized that this generates comfort, but not tension. And without tension, there is no desire. So he does something few have the courage to do. He alternates. One day he is present, engaging, attentive. The next, he retreats. He becomes colder, more distant, more self-focused. Not like a childish game, but as a calculated use of emotional force. He creates peaks and valleys. And her brain begins to try to understand. What changed? What did I do? And it is at this moment that the emotional investment begins to grow. And here comes one of the most delicate points. He never exaggerates on either side, because excessive coldness breaks the connection. Excessive warmth eliminates the challenge. The secret lies in the contrast. It's like light and shadow in a painting. One only exists because of the other. Virtù and fortuna. Knowing when to advance and when to retreat. For example, after an intense encounter where there was connection, laughter, perhaps even a closer touch, he doesn't maintain the same energy level the next day. He slows down, he responds less, he becomes more self-centered. This creates a slight discomfort. But it is precisely this discomfort that activates something powerful, the need for reconnection. And when he returns with presence, with attention, the impact is greater. It's as if her brain receives a reward after a brief scarcity, and this begins to create a pattern, a cycle. Without realizing it, she begins to associate him with this emotional mountain, and this holds her captive, much more than any superficial constancy. But here's the detail that few understand. This doesn't work if it's mechanical. It's not about following a fixed script. It's about reading. Decisions based on real human nature. He observes signs. He senses the moment. He perceives when to pull and when to let go. Constant adaptability, because each person reacts in a different way. Some need more warmth at the beginning. Others respond better to mystery from the start. He doesn't force, he adjusts. And that's what differentiates an amateur from someone strategic, because while the amateur tries to please, he creates tension. While the other seeks approval, he creates impact. And little by little, this alternation begins to do something even deeper. It begins to invert the value dynamic, because when someone feels they might lose, they start wanting more. And that's exactly where the game changes level. This is where most lose the game, because they enter desperately trying to prove their worth, when in reality value is never proven, it's presumed. He understood this early on. While others praise too much, validate too much, show off too much, he does the opposite. Not out of gratuitous coldness, but out of strategy, a policy guided by reality, not by ideals. He knows that excessive validation creates comfort, and comfort reduces attraction. So he positions himself differently. He doesn't give approval easily. He doesn't react with exaggerated enthusiasm. He observes, evaluates, and only then shows interest, subtly. This creates a silent inversion. Instead of him trying to conquer, she starts looking for signs of approval. And when that happens, the axis of the dynamic changes completely, because now it's no longer him trying to be chosen, it's her trying to stand out in his eyes. And this activates something profound, the competitive instinct. And pay attention to this. He never directly devalues her. He doesn't criticize gratuitously. He doesn't belittle her. He doesn't create artificial insecurity. His game is more refined, an appearance of virtue. He maintains respect, maintains elegance, maintains control. But at the same time, he doesn't give everything away. A simple example, when she seeks validation, whether with a photo, a comment, or an action, he doesn't respond with perfect, too beautiful, wonderful. He might even acknowledge it, but in a restrained, specific, almost rare way. Something like, "That's interesting," or "You have a different way about you." It seems like little, but that's exactly why it carries weight, because it doesn't come easily. And her brain registers, "This is different, I need to understand it better." And without realizing it, she starts investing more energy, more attention, more attempts. And that's when he starts building scarcity, because what is rare is valued, and what is difficult to achieve captivates. Now, here's a crucial point that few master. He doesn't play with artificial scarcity. He builds a life that naturally generates scarcity. His own loyal armies, that is, he has focus, purpose, routine, and priorities. He's not available all the time because he has more important things happening: work, projects, personal growth. This creates a real foundation. It's not acting, it's structure. And this makes his absence weighty because it doesn't seem like disinterest. It seems like value. Virtu and fortuna again. He acts strategically, but also positions himself in a way that the context favors his image. And the more she realizes that he doesn't depend on her, the more she starts to want to be part of his world. But this process hasn't reached its peak yet, because when scarcity combines with something even more subtle, something almost invisible, the impact ceases to be merely rational and becomes profoundly psychological, silent, and impossible to ignore. If there's one thing he masters like few others, it's silence. Not empty, uncomfortable, directionless silence, but strategic silence. The kind that speaks without saying anything, the kind that creates questions without offering answers, because he understood something most ignore. Emptiness is one of the greatest mental triggers that exist. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. While many try to fill every space with words, messages, explanations, he does the opposite. He creates pauses, and in those pauses, her mind begins to work, because human beings don't tolerate the unknown. When there's no answer, they create one. When there's no certainty, they imagine. And it's in this terrain, invisible, internal, psychological, that the real game happens. He doesn't need to say, "I miss you." Well-placed silence makes her miss him. And observe how this manifests in practice. He doesn't respond immediately, not out of disinterest, but out of control. If he receives a message at night, he might respond only the next day, calmly, as if he were busy living his life. If he meets with her and the moment is good, he doesn't prolong it indefinitely. He ends at the peak. He leaves a little, "I want more." This creates an incomplete feeling, and the brain seeks to complete it. It's almost like a song that stops before the end. It stays in your head. That's the power of silence. Calculated use of force. Here, the force is absence. And when he speaks, he doesn't talk too much. He chooses his words. Short, direct phrases with intention. This creates weight. Because the less you speak, the more each word matters. And the rarer the contact, the more valuable it becomes. It's scarcity applied with surgical precision. Now, here's the point that transforms everything. Silence isn't just external, it's internal too. It doesn't react impulsively. It doesn't respond to everything it feels. It doesn't unleash every emotion the moment it arises. Decisions are based on real human nature. It observes its own impulses and chooses to act or not to act. This generates control, and this control generates power, because while the other side is trying to interpret, trying to understand, trying to fill the void, it remains calm, centered, present. Virtù and fortuna again, inner mastery combined with external timing. And the more it practices this, the more it realizes that it's not the excess of communication that creates connection. It's the space between communications. That's where the bond is built. But there's something even more subtle, because when silence finds an emotional opening, when it chooses the right moment to lower its guard, the effect becomes even deeper, almost inevitable. Now he does something that at first glance seems to contradict everything. He shows himself to be vulnerable, but not in the impulsive, disorganized, emotionally dependent way that most people are. No. Here there is precision, there is timing, there is strategy. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. He understands that showing strength all the time creates admiration, but it doesn't create deep connection. And connection is what binds. So at the right moment, he opens small cracks. He doesn't reveal everything. He reveals enough, a fragment, a story, an old pain but already partially resolved. This humanizes, this brings him closer. And more importantly, this activates something powerful in her, the instinct to care. Because when someone strong shows a small crack, it has enormous weight. It doesn't seem like weakness. It seems like selective confidence. And that generates value. And notice the detail. He never uses vulnerability as a cry for help. He doesn't portray himself as a victim, doesn't transfer emotional responsibility, doesn't seek validation, no appearance of virtue. He shares something, but maintains composure. Something like, "I've been through a difficult phase, but I learned a lot from it." Simple, direct, no drama. This creates a curious feeling. She perceives depth, perceives history, perceives humanity, but at the same time sees stability. And this generates a strong emotional attraction. A practical example, in a deeper conversation, instead of keeping everything superficial or trying to impress all the time, he might comment on a time when he needed to rebuild himself without going into excessive detail. This creates a connection. But because he doesn't delve too deeply, he leaves space. And again, her brain kicks in. It wants to understand more. It wants to access more. And it's at this point that she begins to engage not only with his image, but with his story. But here's the most strategic point of all. He doesn't do this all the time. He doesn't become emotionally predictable. Virtù and fortuna. He chooses the moment. Perhaps after he's already created attraction, tension, curiosity. Perhaps when he perceives an openness on the other side. Constant adaptability, because vulnerability at the wrong time diminishes value. But at the right moment, it multiplies. And this creates a powerful effect. She feels she's accessing something few have access to, something rare, and human beings value what is exclusive. And the more she feels she's entering a space not open to everyone, the more involved she becomes, the more she invests, the more she connects. But this connection, when combined with unpredictable patterns, begins to activate something even deeper, something that is no longer just emotional, but almost chemical, addictive. Here, the game reaches a level that few even realize exists. Because we're no longer just talking about behavior, we're talking about neurochemistry. He understood that the human brain doesn't cling to what is constant, it clings to what is unpredictable. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. That's why predictable rewards lose impact over time, while intermittent rewards create dependence. It's the same principle that keeps people trapped in games, social networks, and even intense relationships, and he applies this almost invisibly. One day he gives attention, presence, connection. The next, he diminishes, retreats, turns inward. And this alternation creates a powerful mental pattern, because when she receives attention, the brain releases dopamine. When she loses it, she goes on a quest, and the more this oscillation happens, the more the brain becomes conditioned to want that peak again. And the most interesting thing is that this doesn't need to be exaggerated. Small variations are enough. One day he sends a more engaging message, starts a conversation, creates a connection. The next, he responds more neutrally, more briefly. An intense encounter followed by a few days of personal focus. An unexpected compliment amidst a more reserved demeanor. Calculated use of force, here, applied to the emotional level. This creates something the person can't rationally explain, but feels. And the more they try to understand, the more involved they become. It's like trying to solve a riddle, and the human brain loves unsolved riddles. Therefore, while many believe they need to be consistent to keep someone interested, he understands that it's the variation that keeps the interest alive. Virtù and fortuna again, knowing how to act and knowing how to interrupt. Now here's the most profound point. This only works when it comes from someone who has inner control. Because if they themselves are emotionally unstable, it becomes chaos, not strategy. Decisions based on real human nature. They don't react impulsively. They choose when to intensify and when to reduce. Constant adaptability. And this creates a dynamic where they begin to associate it with something rare, something that isn't always available. But when it appears, it has an impact. And this association over time transforms into attachment. An attachment that doesn't come from security, but from searching. And this is where many get lost, because when they dominate this game for too long, they begin to perceive something strange, something that doesn't appear at the beginning, but grows silently, a consequence that few are prepared to face. Now comes the part that almost no one shows. Because it doesn't sell, it's not pretty. It doesn't look like a victory, but it's real. He spent so much time understanding the game, applying strategy, controlling perception, alternating presence and absence, that little by little, he began to perceive something strange within himself. What was once connection became control. What was once curiosity became a pattern. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, only now applied to himself. He no longer enters into interactions lightly. He analyzes, calculates, adjusts. Every gesture, every word, every silence, everything has intention, and this, in the beginning, seems like power. But with time, it begins to weigh him down. Because when everything becomes strategy, nothing is spontaneous anymore. And without realizing it, he begins to lose something essential, the ability to simply feel and look at the paradox. The more he dominates others, the less he feels dominated by any real emotion. He doesn't fully surrender. He doesn't allow himself true vulnerability. He doesn't relax. Always an appearance of virtue, always control, always a calculated use of force. But this creates an invisible distance. He is present, but not fully present. And the other side, even without understanding exactly why, begins to feel this. There may even be attraction, interest, even attachment. But something is missing. Genuine depth is missing. And over time, he begins to realize that he can easily generate desire, but he can't sustain anything beyond that. Because every time the connection starts to become too real, he retreats, adjusts, controls. And so the cycle repeats. Conquest, intensity, distancing, again and again and again. And here is the most silent point of all. He becomes a prisoner of his own strategy. Virtù and fortuna become automatic habits, constant adaptability, even within himself. He no longer knows when he is being himself or when he is playing, and this creates a strange feeling of emptiness. Because on the outside, everything seems under control, but inside, something is missing that cannot be simulated. Commitment is missing, truth is missing, and it is at this moment that he begins to realize that mastering the game has a cost, and that perhaps there is something beyond control, something he has avoided all along, something that cannot be manipulated, only lived. And it is precisely there that the story completely changes direction, and then he finally sees what few dare to face. The method works. It works very well. He creates attraction, generates desire, awakens interest, builds presence. He manages to make someone think about him, feel for him, invest in him. But at the same time, something begins to crumble inside, because deep down he knows that's not love. It's a response. It's a reaction. It's the consequence of a well-executed strategy. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. But here's the problem. When everything becomes calculation, feeling loses ground. He no longer asks himself, what do I feel for her? But rather, what's the next move? And that changes everything. Because loving requires risk. And he spent too much time avoiding risk, controlling, predicting, adjusting. And without realizing it, he eliminated exactly what makes love real. And the hardest part is realizing that this affects not only what he feels, but what he receives. Because even when someone starts to truly get involved, there's always an invisible layer between them and the other person. An appearance of virtue, a calculated presence, measured emotion, and this prevents total depth. The person may like, may desire, may even become attached, but they don't access who he really is. Because he himself no longer shows himself completely. And then the unsettling question arises, how can someone love something they've never had complete access to? The end justifies the means, up to a point. Because when the means are constant control, the end ceases to be connection and becomes disguised isolation. He's not rejected, but he's also not truly known. And this creates a silent loneliness, the kind that doesn't appear in interactions, but weighs heavily when he's alone. And then comes the final realization, not as a ready-made answer, but as a discomfort. Decisions based on real human nature. He realizes that dominating the minds of others is possible, but surrendering one's own mind is another story, much more difficult, much riskier, much more real. Virtù and fortuna don't solve everything here, because there's a territory where strategy doesn't enter, where control doesn't work, where the only path is to feel without guarantees. And that's frightening. But it's also attractive, because maybe, just maybe, there's a way to live all this without getting lost, without closing oneself off, without turning every connection into a game. And this possibility begins to emerge as a doubt, a restlessness, something that is not yet clear, but that begs to be explored. And it is precisely here that everything that has been built up until now begins to be questioned. Now the question is no longer whether it works, because you already understand that it does. The question is different, much more uncomfortable. Will you use this knowledge to dominate or to hide? Because deep down, all of this reveals more about you than about anyone else. It reveals how much you seek control, how much you avoid exposing yourself, how much you prefer to play rather than feel. And here's the turning point that separates those who grow from those who get lost. Understanding the game is power, but knowing when to stop playing is maturity. So tell me, do you want to be remembered only as someone impossible to forget, or as someone impossible to replace? Think about your recent interactions. How many of them were genuine? How many were calculated? How many times did you want to demonstrate something but held back strategically? And how many times did you over-demonstrate for fear of losing? There's a balance here, and it doesn't come from ready-made formulas. It comes from awareness, from decisions based on real human nature, from perceiving when to use silence and when to speak, when to retreat and when to advance. Virtu and fortuna, strategy and timing, only now applied not only to others, but to yourself. Because in the end, it's not about conquering someone, it's about not losing yourself in the process. And now I want to really challenge you. Are you experiencing relationships or just creating reactions? Are you building something or just repeating patterns that keep you in control, but far from any real connection? Because if this content resonated with you, don't ignore it, apply it, test it, observe it, adjust it, but above all, observe yourself. And if you want to continue learning how to master the game without becoming its hostage, you already know the way. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because what you saw here today is just the surface.